You are now listening to the JBJ Podcast, Business to Business.
Hi, I'm Willis Johnson. This is the JBJ Management Podcast, and I'm really excited about this business to business section of our podcast and where we're going today. Some of it's business, some of it's personal, and today it's Noah Dial, who is our Senior Vice President at JBJ Management. I guess I'm supposed to act like this first time I've seen you in a while.
What's up, boss? How are you?
Let's talk about your role at JBJ. What is that?
Right. So exactly like you said, Senior Vice President here, and I manage our Minority and Women Business Enterprise and Small Business Enterprise Compliance Division, which really accounts for how much companies are spending with minority and women-owned businesses. It's a very important role. And the public sector and private sector if those companies are interested. So we can help validate that information for you. And I also handle some community outreach aspects as a part of working here.
So when I think about that, Noah, let's talk about from a national perspective, because it's not just Dallas-centric. These are issues that people are dealing with all over America. How is America dealing with MWBE? How is America dealing with the small business owner, in your opinion?
Well, the more I learn about it, I think it's pretty interesting. When you start to look at companies and they have diversity and inclusion on their website, and they have one diversity and inclusion manager who's supposed to handle everything for their company, and you start to talk with and you start to speak with these people, you understand that actually what's happening is somebody's being hired to save face and to keep quiet. That's what you run into a lot. And so what I love about what we've done here at JBJ is that we're mission based first. So we're really trying to do and hold the companies accountable to an actual standard of what's acceptable and what's best for everybody. And we've done a great job as far as having conversations, really thoughtful and impactful conversations on a national level that have allowed companies to say that they want to work with us.
Yeah, because we're talking about Houston, Austin, Chicago, Baltimore. Those are places that we're talking about individually as a firm doing business in. And there is a need for MWBE, I'm sure, in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It's just almost anywhere.
And small businesses too. I mean, even though we're a minority company, we understand that there's small businesses, local businesses that work, that there's small businesses everywhere that are looking to grow. And then we also have minority and women owned businesses who we work with. So we're, I love the position, the opportunity to meet so many people, the opportunity to make sure that those people are included on large contracts, to help the larger companies be creative on how they have access to you. You know, it's not that these companies don't exist; it's that you might not know them. So we help bridge that gap.
You've been to several conferences and or conventions, whether it's been in Seattle or LA or San Francisco or Houston, with a group called NAMAC. And then there is the, I guess, on the concession side. So when you've gone to these different conferences, what's the conversation going on about diversity?
Well, I think everything is, it's definitely about relationship building. And like I said, a lot of the larger companies who might have a low minority or women-owned business percentage, it's just a lack of outreach in the correct areas. And so one of the great things about those conferences is it allows any business to attend, of course, but if you can get in the right room and you can say and prove that you're knowledgeable about what you're able to do for those companies, then it really builds a long-lasting relationship. And what you found is that people like to work with people they're comfortable with and who know are going to perform well. And so if you have no doubt about your ability to perform well, then just make sure that you do that. And hopefully you get a continuing opportunity.
Noah, I've seen this. These names have changed, but the focus is still the same. When I was your age, and I want to get to what your age is, it was affirmative action. That's what they called it. Then it became something else. And so now, after George Floyd was killed, and that's an interesting thing too. That's 9 minutes when people were confined in COVID, and you watched for 9 minutes a man die. And so there's been this thing now, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's not the first time that a black man has died because a police officer's knee was on his neck, both literally and figuratively. How long does this last? Because George Floyd, now it's been over a year. How long does this last?
I think it's an important question. I think it's interesting you brought that up, because really it's exactly what you said it is. It's a historical marker, but it's not that it wasn't happening. It was just a historical marker for everybody. There's, it's funny about when the sayings come up that are never forget this. And then sometimes when you're talking about black issues, it's why haven't you gotten over that yet? Or how long do we have to watch you kneel at a football game? Or how long do we have to, there's a lot of scrutiny and skepticism when it comes to issues with, especially dealing with the African-American community, but with minority communities just in general. I think what should happen is that it should, you should use all your rights at your disposal to continue to push very important social issues like that, like diversity and inclusion, as a constant reminder. I also think that you have to work with your allies, the people who are willing to work with you, about implementing policies and building relationships intentionally in order to solve those issues. And I don't think it's something that's going to be solved, overnight. I think people should be allowed to, fight for social issues all the time. I think part of the dangerous conversation is when people start telling you, how long do I have to pay attention to that? So it's an ongoing journey. Definitely find some allies. Definitely don't forget, where you came from. And definitely if you get into a position of power or a position of responsibility, not power, which is different. If you get into a position of responsibility, what's being measured is purely integrity. And so I can't make somebody do anything, but really, what do you want your life to say? And if you're going to spend your life holding somebody else back as opposed to helping somebody else up, that says a lot about you.
So with that in mind, I remember as a kid, my father took me to the polls to vote. I didn't realize what he was trying to do at that time, Noah. He wanted me to see him pay to vote. Because at that time, black folks still had to pay to actually be able to vote. And so I didn't realize until later in life, he was trying to show me just what it was like being a black man in those particular times. One of the things that we're trying to do here at JBJ is bring along young African-American men and set an example. What is it like today for a 30-year-old African-American male to navigate society, your job, social issues, just living in 2021, 2022 for a 30-year-old African-American male in business?
Yeah, just a great question. It's definitely interesting. One, because you're trying to navigate the I think the responsibility once you get an opportunity course, everything that you're going to do is people trying to move forward in life and get to the highest possible. I don't know if that's everybody's actually, but, just trying to make the most out of yourself. And I think when you're navigating it, when you're young and Black and you're trying to figure out, what you want to be is to make sure that your merit for your business acumen is good enough that nobody can, no matter what race they are going to be able to tell you what you can and can't do when you're in that position. So you're trying to make sure you measure up to that responsibility. I think more than that, just being raised in the South, a lot of the stuff that I hear, it makes me laugh more than it does make me, angry or upset. I hear somebody say something that's ignorant, because I take a macro look at it. I'm very happy to be who I am. Didn't choose it. So it says a lot about your character when you stand on, if you're a white male and you stand on the grounds of, I'm going to find a reason that slavery was okay. I'm going to find a reason that white people are better than Black people. I'm going to find a reason instead of the opposite. And so it says a lot about who you are as a person. So when I'm navigating that, I'm trying to operate with character and integrity. So in any room I'm in, that's what I'm trying to do for, my end goals.
Because what I've seen, Noah, I've watched you live in New York, which I'm always living vicariously through you, because
I'm living vicariously through me.
I wish I had done that. I mean, just to live in New York, man, a single man in New York. Oh my God. Yeah, I missed that. I missed that opportunity. But as I think about what you experienced on the East Coast and then come back to the South, how do you apply what you learned, New York, Washington, New Jersey, into Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, in the South?
Well, the Northeast definitely has a different energy as far as aggressiveness and things that need to go on, about just saying what you need to happen. I think there's a big misconception that northern areas are less segregated or racist than southern areas. Southern area, they're just, it's not even say quiet about it. It's written more in their structures and laws than it is saying something to your face, as opposed to, you might go to the South and say, oh, they've got Confederate flags and but regardless of where you are in America, that game is still going on everywhere. So that was one of the more eye-opening things to me, because I was talking to a friend from Wisconsin the other day, and they said there's a clear divide in who lives over here and who lives over there. But they don't tell you that we don't like Black people. We just tell you where we're going to let you buy a house, or where we're going to appraise your place at. And so she lived on one side and went to school on the other side at a private school. And so, but mostly what I've learned, especially in the difference between being in the Northeast and Dallas, is really truly about the fact that I can have an actual impact. And I think that's something that I don't think everybody believes in themselves for, is to say, can I actually change something? And I've seen it a lot where, because I was in the right room or because I decided to speak up instead of stay quiet, that things changed. And so I think it's also a gauge of character. And, at the end, when you start to say, hey, was I willing to speak up even though I was a little bit uncomfortable? Was I willing to say something to my friend even though I was a little bit uncomfortable? And I've also run into this idea that it's hard to advocate for diversity when you're Black. So when I'm speaking to other people, because it seems like in the end it's to benefit you, not that it's a strategy for success, which it is.
It's just the right thing to do.
Right. But it's really a strategy for success. Yeah, that's what I've learned the most about, is I actually have an ability to impact things.
As JBJ Management moves into Chicago, how do you take your experiences in New York and in the South to Chicago? Because that's a whole different animal too.
Just golden rule stuff. You just want to treat everybody the way you want to be treated. You want to make sure that your business acumen is good. Of course, when you're going up there, you want to make sure you're well researched. I don't know too much about Chicago. I've heard some stuff, but that doesn't mean it's true. I haven't heard too much about Chicago.
The police chief says it's true.
Yeah. But I mean, when I'm going in there and making relationships, or when anybody's going anywhere, it's just, it's all character driven. Do what you say you're going to do. Make sure you're talking to the right, giving everybody an opportunity. Operate with integrity. And I think a lot of the things I've learned in my life, at least someone will think about what you said had character and integrity behind it, regardless of whether it was the thing that they wanted or not.
As a 30-year-old that has a 45-year-old spirit, that's just my personal opinion. What do you say to a 21-year-old? And this is my final question. What do you say to a 21-year-old who aspires to be where you are?
I mean, everything that you're going to do is going to require hard work. People ask, what's the secret? And it's going to be hard work. You're going to work every day. You're going to do. But I think Will Smith said it better than kind of I did is your days are brick by brick. If you're trying to build a wall and you say, I want to build the whole wall, it's tough to do that. But if you place a really solid brick every day, because that's what your days are, you'll look up and you'll have a strong structure. And so I think I've thought about that since I was a kid. It's if I take the advice of people older than me who really have, we're living similar lives, if I listen to people who have my best interest, but then also question, you have to look at things from your own perspective as well. But just compound your good decisions. That's it. It's one bad decision that can mess everything up. One thing that knocks the whole wall down. So just compound your good decisions over and over, and you'll look up one day and you'll realize you are successful. I'm in a way unimaginable place than I would have told myself I was when I quit my job in New York. So, that's the best advice I could give. Is compound your good decisions.
Noah Dowell is the senior vice president at JBJ Management, and he has a long way to go and a lot of time to get it done. We're excited about the steps that he's taken and really excited about where he's going to take us. I'm Willis Johnson. This is the JBJ Management Podcast.
You are now listening to the JBJ Podcast, Generation Z.
Hey, welcome to the Gen Z segment of the JBJ Podcast. I'm your host, Camron Powell.
And I'm your co-host, Lauren Taylor.
And today we have a special guest, Ms. Sherilyn Roberts. Sherilyn Roberts is a media professional specializing in public relations, marketing, and promotion in the business, academic, nonprofit, and public engagement sectors.
She also has extensive experience in video production and recently produced content for the Visit Dallas website highlighting the African American story in Dallas.
Ms. Sherilyn is a graduate of Texas Southern University with a bachelor's degree in journalism. She has participated in the Wesleyan University Writers Workshop, the Harvard University Neiman Journalism Workshop, and the Video Production Community Access Workshop at New York University. Ms. Sherilyn, how are you doing today?
Hi there, Cam, Taylor, Lauren. I'm so glad to be here. A little bit nervous. I'm always behind the camera, so I'm nervous about being in front.
There's no need to be nervous. I'm glad to have you. Biggest question I have for you today is actually, what questions do you have for us today? We know we come from two completely different generations. We're Gen Z, we're young, we're what you would call hip, I guess. What does your generation assume or question about ours?
Good question, Cam, because I have a lot to say about that. Not a whole lot, but I have questions. I have answers to some of these questions now. I had to do a little bit of research to find out if I was getting the correct information about my perception of Gen Z. There are, I guess, about 6 levels. They got the millennials, the X's, and all of that. Mm-hmm. Well, you all fall down, because I'm older. Yeah. I mean, about 3 levels down. So that's a whole different generation. So what I found out was that you are the youngest and you are the largest generation in American history, which I did not know. 27% of the United States you are 27% of the United States population, which I thought that was really, really big. There are 72 million of you here.
It's a lot of them.
It's a lot of a lot of votes.
They come with numbers.
A lot of votes. And one of the definitions, and I took the one from Pew Research, was that anybody born after 1997 up to like 2012 are considered Gen Z.
And that's a loose stretch. You got some people on both spectrums that don't agree with that all the way, but I think that's a pretty good window of us.
One of the things that I really found interesting, and I guess I kind of knew it in the back of my mind, you all were the first generation to use smartphones. In fact, you got your smartphones before you were 12 years old. I mean,
right around that time. Yeah,
exactly. And you all communicate primarily through social media and text. Now that's where it kind of throws me off, because you can text me 5 times, but on that 6th time, you got to pick up the phone and call me.
And so,
I'm not used to my nieces, great nieces and nephews. They are constantly texting. And I mean, we've got all these texts, and I'm like, will somebody pick up the phone?
And that's a big difference, like you're talking about, between our generations. Like with my dad and my parents and stuff, they'll ask me, "Oh, have you talked to him today? Talked to your brother today?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, I Snapchatted him, I texted him, I said hi, I saw him, but I mean, I haven't called him. No, we don't call each other. No one does that." And that's a big thing. My dad always calls, pick up the phone, talk to me.
Yeah, I'm the same way, and it's hard for me to get used to it, because sometimes I'll run over to you all side just to, because I know I can text you, but I was like, no, I need to see him. I want to see your facial expression. I want to see, how I can tell how you really feel. But communicating with that device all of the time kind of throws me off. And plus, I worry about being social. Yeah. If you're always on a smartphone, I see people out. Like my family, I go to a family event, and my sister, who is older than me, and the older ones, we're all chatting in a corner. All the young people are texting. They're texting back and forth or whatever. Everybody's got their heads down. And I was like, "Can I have your attention, please?"
And I'm sorry, but me and Lauren had actually had that conversation earlier today about the different generations and how they interact. Like, what did you have to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what Cam and I were talking about was that our generation was kind of in that transition, like you were talking about. So we grew up the first 10, 12 years of our life doing that outside, seeing friends, go roller skating, run around, play tag, whatever it is kids do growing up. And then we kind of transitioned into that world of social media that is so prevalent today. And it's definitely a way we communicate. An interesting thing is when we're on, especially a lot of younger people, with COVID, for example, a lot of people use social media as a way to maintain those relationships. So like, I don't know, I would say our generation's not as good as communicating face to face. Maybe right. A lot of times we are, but a lot of times people find that comfort in communicating via social media and having that online connection when you can't even be in person.
Well, one of the things that we still do, my friends and I, we still write notes. You know, we have stamps.
Handwritten notes. They're so rare.
I know I have stamps and I write notes. I mean, that's how I communicate. Because at home I have personalized stationery, and for certain things, that's what I send my notes out on.
Right, like if I got a handwritten letter in the mail, it would make my day. Like that's so rare.
That's the thing. Like that kind of stuff is rare now. Like
we don't get mail. Who get bills. That's it.
I remember as a kid, I used to love opening mail. I haven't opened now I open mail as a bill. Like I don't like that.
I have to send you something then. And I was going to point out when now you're still in college. When I was in college, I worked. I worked for a little community newspaper called the Houston Informer. It's pretty big down there now, but I worked. It was just a little small community. It published once a week. And one of the things where now I wished I'd had social media. My good friend, I went to Texas Southern, so one of my really good friends, a guy that I'd grown up with, Gene Locke, was at University of Houston, and he was over the Black Association there. So they had brought Stokely Carmichael, the activist, to Houston, to University of Houston. So I had called Gene at his apartment. And I said, well, Gene, I said, I want to come and, I have my little press credentials, and can you get me in? He said, absolutely. Well, we could have eliminated a whole lot of steps because I got there. I got in line because people everywhere. When I finally got up there, I said, Gene said, well, tell him to come and get me. If I'd had a smartphone, I could have texted him and he would have, known I was there, whatever. So they put me over to the side because he had left a note at the desk and said, if she comes up. Well, the photographer, I didn't know that the editor was going to send a photographer down there to try to get some shots. Well, he didn't have any press credentials.
Oh,
he now owns the paper, and he probably doesn't remember this story. But I had my little press card, and he had his, his camera, and I said, you with the Houston Informer. He said, yeah. I said, well, my friend Gene, I'm going to see if he can get us in. And true enough, Gene came out, got us in. We were able to get what we needed. He got his shots and everything. And that's the time when I said, just think if we'd had cell phones.
Right. Like,
but you don't miss what you don't have. But it was all through college, those kinds of incidences came up. One other time we had gotten free tickets on campus to go hear Martin Luther King speak. Okay. This was in 1968, 67, so right before he died. And it was at the El Dorado Ballroom over on Scott. And what we did was, on campus, not many people with cars, but the guy that I was going with at the time got somebody with a car. They picked me up at the dorm and we went down there. Well, the most interesting, not only was he phenomenal in his speaking, but Aretha Franklin opened for him. Wow. She was the opening act. And I cannot tell you, I remember that whole show like it was yesterday.
That was a long time ago. That's what we call BC, before Camron. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was. And then it was just those kinds of opportunities. And Lauren, with you were right out of college.
Absolutely.
When I got out of college, it was 1969. So, all kinds of things were going on in the world. In 1968, Jesse Jackson had spoken. He was the keynote speaker at the Howard University commencement. And his thing was, I am somebody. And I know you probably heard that saying, but that's when he first, I am somebody, and it became a chant. It just all through the Black neighborhood. One of the things that I noticed when I was reading about Gen Zs, you all are really into Black Lives Matter, diversity and inclusion, things like that. We were always taught, love your neighbor, be kind to people and all that. That just was from our religious upbringings. But you all actually do it, even though I don't know how much you go to church or you believe or whatever. That's, your own preference. But according to the research that I did, you all are really, really into, like I said, treating people right. And for the underdog, the person who is most attacked, transgender,
LGBTQ. And I think that is like a big value of our generation, because when we were being brought up, we were always taught to just treat people with respect and stuff like that. Like it never was about, race or creed or anything like that. Right. And so just for me I always went to different schools, and growing up in the North, I was a lot of times the only Black kid in my class, like many times. And the first school I went to Montessori school. I went to a Spanish immersion school for the first few years of my life. And then I went to a magnet, and at the Spanish immersion school, I was one of the very few Black kids there. But I went to a magnet performing arts school. So that was my big introduction into diversity, because that school, we had people from all over the state, or all over the Twin Cities, come in. And it was cool. Like I built a lot of relationships that I still have to this day. And that was really nice for me to see that kind of diversity at a young age. But a lot of people don't get to see, because in some regions, they never leave home and never leave the neighborhood. And people miss out on stuff like that.
I was just the opposite, but it was so similar, because I went to totally segregated schools. I grew up in a totally segregated environment all the way through college. My first experiences with integration was my junior year. My parents allowed me to go to New York for the summer, and I stayed with my aunt, and I got a job. And the job was through Staff Builders, was the temp agency. And it was integrated, totally integrated,
Wow.
And I was like, oh my goodness. And
was that a shock for you, seeing the first integration?
Yeah. It was. Well, I lived on the edge of our house was like the beginnings of a totally segregated neighborhood. Okay. And we didn't venture, like I said, there was a vacant lot between us and the white family. And, sometimes like kids do, we get along really, really well. Right. Other times we didn't. And so, but I never went in their house ever. Never. And they never came in our house. We would always meet either at the big tree, or sometimes they come in our yard, because from my house on, there were lots of kids, lots of kids in our neighborhood. One family had 8 kids, one had 9. It was just kids everywhere. So it was always a baseball game going on in the vacant lot by the peanut patty.
Like Sandlot.
We had a candy. Right. We had a candy, like it was a manufacturing place right there. Our neighbor made peanut patties, which were known all over Texas.
And Miss Sherilyn, I'm sorry, but like, how was that? So our generation, they say generations are defined by generations, what they go through, the major events, whether they be traumatic or just substantial, the major events during a child's developmental years is what defines them as a generation. So your generational events that took place are vastly different from what happened during mine.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
everyone, goes through something growing up, but you can't really like quantify which is worse. But I mean, arguably being a Black woman growing up in that time
Mhm.
was very rough.
Mhm.
But what are some of our generational?
I would say things that we grew up seeing, something we've been talking about is school shootings is
Yeah.
something
Mhm.
that we grew up hearing all the time, never knowing kind of what the future would look like for that, because that's not something that a kid should have to be dealing with. Growing up in our generation being like, this school had 4 kids shot by just like a shooter today, or every time on the news, it's
just a few days ago, actually.
in Arlington. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So seeing that, I mean, 9/11, the earliest of Gen Z might
Mhm.
remember some of that. Like I was
Right.
born in 99. I don't remember
Mhm.
Mhm.
that. I just remember the effect of it growing up, knowing, like hearing my parents or family talk about it, knowing people who had loved ones in that instance,
Mhm.
and having to try and understand and rationalize that as a 6, 7, 8-year-old. It really kind of gives you a darker view of the world from a really young age.
Mhm.
And that's what they say. A lot of Gen Z, the way we are is a lot of us like to be independent. And the older generations, it was normal for them to get a job right out of high school and work that job the rest of their life.
Right.
Mhm.
My generation doesn't do that. We'll job hop, we'll find different jobs. We prioritize our time, because growing up, we saw that the biggest things that I've seen that our generation had to go through was 9/11 a little bit, so like the kind of terrorism kind of
Right.
thing, and then school shootings as well. But mainly it was when the recession hit. That's when we were all about 8, 10 years old.
Right.
Mhm.
And we started to see all our parents struggle. They had to do it. They always talk about how there was no money out,
Mhm.
whatever. And we growing up, we always saw that. We're like, we got to get money. Like that's our biggest
Right.
thing. So a lot of us value the time and what we get paid for our time. So that's why a lot of our generation, you'll see us doing oddball things, jobs that
Mhm.
didn't exist back in the day,
Exactly.
but we're making money off of it. So
Mhm.
I think that's another big difference between our generations.
Absolutely. I grew up in 48, so I know about the
Right.
war because I had uncles that had gone to work. What the war meaning World War II, but then it was in the 50s when I had come of age. When I could really be aware of the colored and the white water fountain that was in the courthouse or in the J.C. Penney store. We could never use the bathroom at any of those places. There was a basement in the courthouse, which was maybe several blocks up, that we had to go down in the basement. That's the only place. So my mother always made us, go to the bathroom before we left home. And, they knew some places that they could stop so we could go to the bathroom. So I remember those vividly. But because we were in a segregated environment, we looked after each other. It was our parents that were, my mother had a master's degree, but they still called her girl when we went in the stores. Or my dad, they referred to him as boy, and, you could tell that hurt.
Mhm.
But they always wanted to protect us.
Right.
Because see, I remember Emmett Till. It was before my time,
Right.
but that story continued
lingered.
it lingered. It wasn't before my time. It was doing when I was young, but they would bring it back because we had 2 publications, and Lauren, you'll appreciate this: Ebony and Jet magazine.
Okay.
I wanted to work for Ebony magazine when I got out of school because Leron Bennett was one of the writers there, and I just would read everything because they kept us up on everything that was going on in Black America. And I wanted to work there. And believe it or not, when I moved to Chicago, I had my little portfolio in a file folder, and I went down
You
there.
were
and
ready.
She's
Dropped
ready
it
to go.
off. I didn't get the job, but 2 weeks later, I went to work for UPI, which was just as good.
Miss Sherilyn, before we get out of here, we're kind of running low on time. I just want to ask you one more question. What is one thing about my generation that you love, or one thing about my generation that you despise or you just do not understand?
I'm excited to hear this.
Well, you all are perfect. So you all, but I do have nieces and nephews too, so I can kind of pull on that, even though they're family. But one of the things that I like is you're so tech savvy. I mean, Lauren can tell you. Yesterday, I would have been still waiting on this document from Java to put it in a PDF. JPEG, I think I was waiting on.
Right.
She came in there and took that document, converted it over within 5 minutes. We had distributed Constant Contact. And I'm like, what?
We all try to help you out.
Yeah,
Sure.
so she's going to really be my, help me with improve my social media skills, because I have Facebook, but the only reason why I use Facebook is so I can download pictures from my niece of her kids.
Oh, that's sweet.
And I read some of the stuff,
That's
but I don't
sweet,
befriend very many people. So I want to do that. And my LinkedIn, I really, really want to keep that updated. And so you're going to have to help me.
We'll
do
help
that.
you with all that stuff.
Yeah, technology.
But
It's
you know,
fun.
the one thing that, and I have only you all to go on though, the one thing I've noticed though, and it's not a negative, is that I'm always worried that you haven't done your research.
Right.
You haven't gone back and done, that worries me.
You're a
more than
very
anything.
research
Very
calculated
research-based.
person.
I
You
am.
always have stuff written down. She's got papers in here that she was ready today.
She looked this up.
Well, I was always taught, it's all about the details in what we do. And of
Mhm.
course, Lauren knows that too. But to marry the technology that I'm going to be really good at,
Yes, you are.
and then the details and the other parts, I
Right.
think you all have it. You all will have that,
Yeah.
because you already got the technology part, and you're on the road to being as good as I am. And that's
We'll get there one day. It's a
Yeah.
hard act to follow. It's hard to fill your shoes.
y'all are
Michelle.
good. And they don't brag about what they do. They just when a need comes up, they just do it. And I was like, oh, you can do that. Remember our conversation, Cam?
I kind of, but no. I just want to say thank you for coming in today. We had a pretty good conversation about the differences between our generations, and I'm looking forward to continuing this podcast going forward. So, I mean, whether you liked our opinions or you didn't like our opinions,
What
we're
do
just
we
having
know?
a conversation.
Yep.
What do we know?
We're just 20-year-old kids.
So,
All right, thank you, Miss
thank you,
Sherilyn.
Sherilyn.
Thank you.
You are now listening to the JBJ Podcast, Legacy.
Yeah, and you know, and we, and like you said, Coach, we cried for days and weeks, and then you turn around and you wake up one morning and now it's Cedric Benson, and today is the day that we lost Ced B last year, and so just to lose two of those kind of figures, man, that really made an impact on a lot of people's lives at the University of Texas, man. It's just definitely a sad month. It's our birthday months, me and my dad, but just to think about those two people and the kind of impact that they had on the 40 acres, man, it definitely is a void in your heart. That's for sure, Coach.
Yeah, it just I got up this morning and hit Facebook early and saw Ced's picture on there, and they had all of his great runs, or a lot of them, and what a tough guy and what a great player. And I go back, Willis and BJ, to so many stories about you guys, because that's my life, and that's my little mind's got just the stories and the impact you've had on me. We're playing Michigan in the Rose Bowl, and Cedric's going to be a number 1 draft choice, and he hyperextends his knee on the first play. So the doctors go over and said, I would suggest you wouldn't play. And I said, Cedric, don't play, man. I mean, you're a number 1 pick. We'll be fine. Just don't play. And he said, I'm playing. Tape it up. So he plays the whole game. It doesn't do great, but he's got a hyperextended knee, and he didn't care. He wanted to win that game so badly. So after the game, I'm the last one walking out of the dressing room except for Cedric. He's sitting over by his locker. He's got his head down. He's still got his uniform on. He's crying. So I figure he's hurt. His knee's just killing him. So I go over and I sit down with him. I said, you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm okay. And he's wiping his eyes. And I said, is it your knee? Did you just screw your knee up? And he said, no, Coach. This is the last time I'll ever get to wear a University of Texas football uniform. And he said, and that's an awful feeling. And that's how much pride that guy had. And that's how competitive he was. And he was a little different, like Drake. They both had their edge, and they both had their different things in their personality, but you got to love him. Nobody ever competed harder, and nobody would ever fight for you harder. I remember I got arrested once because I drove a car home, and they didn't change the license plate. I don't know if you remember this or not, BJ, for my dealer car. And the police were following me home. So I felt like everybody else, I was a little uncomfortable. So I park the car in the garage. I take my clothes off. I got a T-shirt and some shorts on, watching Texas basketball against Oklahoma State. And I hear banging on the garage door, and I go out and open it up, and there's 7 cops with guns. hit the ground, man, hit the ground. So I jump on the ground. I got my hands behind me, and I'm raising them up. And I said, I don't know what your deal is, but there's something wrong here, guys. Something wrong here. I didn't steal a car. And Sally's on the ground, so they check the house, and they think we're kidnapped and all this. So they let us go. So I tell the team, Willis, the story the next day, and I said, some of you guys think that you get stopped. I got stopped too. And they pulled guns on me. Cedric stood up and said, yeah, but I'm black. The difference is they just shot me. They just talked to me. That was Cedric.
That definitely was saying B.